forum on green building and design. We are being recorded as the architects understood, and we want to know who all is here. So if you hadn't had a chance to put your name and your organization that you're affiliated with, please do that in the chat, and also put your email address if you'd like to get follow-up information about 350 Wisconsin or the architects that are speaking today. You can do that. We are going to wait until the end of the forum for questions from the group, and if you could, as we're going through the forum, you can put your questions in the chat, and Lisa and I will go through those afterwards to get you guys questions answered. So we're going to get started. We've got three terrific architects with us today from three different fields of architecture. They're going to be talking to us about green building, both in the residential, commercial, and adaptive reuse sectors of building design and construction. Lisa Kennedy is here with us today. Lisa's the executive director at AIA Wisconsin. She's going to be helping me do the introductions. We'll get started with no further ado by introducing our first architect, and that would be Amber Westerman. Amber Westerman is a residential architect based in Spring Green, Wisconsin. She's a residential designer with 37 years of experience drafting construction plans for new homes, remodels, additions, and historic restorations. She has a heartfelt connection to nature, and which inspires her commitment to sustainable design and educating the public on how we can all build healthier, more beautiful, low carbon footprint homes. Amber lives and works in a 1,208 square foot net zero all electric home that she built in Spring Green in 2020. That must have been your COVID project. It's a demonstration house for the work she does. The home is open to the public and has been toured by over 800 people. Her construction blog at pomehomes.org delves into the construction methods and materials that she uses, along with the unusual trials and tribulations of building a new green home. Nice
Thanks,
to have
Steve.
you with us,
Thank you.
Amber.
Yes. Next is Joe Galbraith. Joe is the founder and partner at Galbraith Carnahan Architects in Milwaukee. With over 25 years of experience in architecture, Joe has developed a passion for adaptive reuse and historic preservation of buildings. His firm views building preservation as the most sustainable type of construction because no building will consume fewer resources than one that presently exists. GCA has been recognized by the City of Milwaukee and the American Institute of Architects at Wisconsin with several design awards for their adaptive reuse efforts. Projects such as Convivium, Urban Farm, the Bindery, and the African American Chamber of Commerce have all stepped lightly on the environment while heavily impacting their surrounding neighborhoods. Thank you, Joe.
And our third architect that's with us today is Monica Miller. Monica Miller is a licensed architect with 15 years of experience in a wide variety of building types. She comes to us from Kaler Schlater Architects with their headquarters in Milwaukee, and Monica works in the Madison office. In her current role at Kaler Schlater, she leads projects in the corporate, hospitality, and residential market sector. Monica is on the 2030 Sustainability Committee at Kaler Schlater, working toward integrating sustainable design into the firm's regular practice and on how to approach conversations with clients on green building projects. Monica advocates for attractive, healthy buildings that positively impact the communities that they are in. She believes that good design is possible regardless of the constraints. Monica also serves the design committee at large as the secretary of the AIA Wisconsin Southwest section and as co-chair of the AIA Wisconsin Code Committee. Thank you, Monica, for joining us today. So we were really lucky to get such a variety of architects to join us today, and folks from with different perspectives. So thank you three again for being here today. Let's jump into some of the questions that our group has put together and see where that leads us into the discussion. So the first question was, what is your approach to working with quote unquote green clients? And how is that approach possibly different for a residential client versus a commercial client and a large business client versus an individual or a homeowner or a building owner client? Maybe we start with Amber.
Sure. I like to find out what my client's motivation is, whether they're more aspirational or if they have some practical skills that they're bringing to this. It depends on how much they know about green building to start with, and if they understand that they need to be an advocate for their own project from design all the way through construction, because the residential construction market is not really set up to do green buildings very easily. So the client has to be very, very involved with every decision and be an advocate on their own behalf. So I found that new home builder or clients, homeowners, take a more comprehensive approach to green building, whereas a remodeling or remodeling client usually is dealing with some immediate practical problems that need to be solved. So their spatial or practical problems can include insulation and air sealing and perhaps solar panels, but yeah, that focus on green building can fall away pretty quickly in the face of all the practical decisions that they need to make to bring their building up to a comfort level that they're looking for. So I do like working with new home clients because the green building aspect of it seems to stick from the beginning all the way through better than it does with my remodeling clients.
Sure. Do you find your clients, most of your clients come to you with a plan to do a green building, or they're looking for you to help them to develop that plan?
Well, I definitely look for clients who are already interested in this, because it's kind of a hard sell if they've never even thought about it before. So I like to use the analogy of an electric car. If somebody's in the market for a new car or a used car, they're either thinking electric car or they're not. And so the people who are interested in going with an electric car understand that there's going to be an upfront extra cost for that car, but their monthly operational costs are going to be way lower, and their ongoing maintenance cost is going to be lower. So that mindset, that same mindset has to be brought to bear to a new home or a major remodel that focuses on green energy. That idea that you're going to pay a little bit more upfront for the process. You're going to have to be more discerning customer or buyer in the market, and you're going to have to put some research into it.
Gotcha. How about you, Joe, with your perspective on doing both commercial and residential buildings, and then also the adaptive reuse, similar to the remodels that Amber talks about? How does it typically work with you?
Yeah, I would say, similar to Amber, it's really trying to find people's motivations. In starting the conversation, we ask the question as part of our onboarding process with clients is, what are your sustainable goals? And sometimes that'll then engage into a conversation. Some people, as they're starting these projects, might have very clear sustainability goals. And other times they might have sustainability goals that they're not even really aware of. Sometimes it comes down to products and health in terms of off-gassing of materials, where materials sourced from, how can we reuse materials? I think that in terms of with an existing building, our core goal on a lot of our existing building projects is to reuse and repurpose as many materials as we can, because the embodied energy is already spent on a lot of these materials. And if we're like take my wall, for example, this is a material that's a reclaimed flooring material that was applied as a wall covering, versus getting a gypsum panel that was does anybody know where gypsum is even mined? So it has to be mined and processed into a board material and then shipped. Whereas this material was taken out of a warehouse locally and then, recrafted by people to be used in the building. So I think our approach a lot of times has to do with those materials. Secondarily, with existing buildings, the systems are usually very outdated. So how do we bring up, the baseline is code. So just getting these old heating and cooling systems up to baseline code. And then there are certain programs out there, like PACE Equity is one that we see in common use for people doing redevelopment projects in historic buildings, because that helps with their capital stack as they're trying to create the financing for these projects. And PACE is a program it's called Property Assessed Clean Energy. And it can be used if you can demonstrate that your systems are going to beat kind of the code minimum standard by X amount. You can qualify for this money that comes in as equity that then gets charged against the property. Basically, it levered against the property owner, almost like a tax. So spread out over 30 years. So it's a creative way that developers, especially that are tackling historic preservation or adaptive reuse projects, can accomplish a sustainability goal and also do good on the financial side.
Sure. So who might be the person that or people that you're talking to, Joe, as a client? Is it typically the owner of the company or the head of the facility management or someone else?
A lot of our clients, just from our practice, are owners, are developers or owners. We don't have a ton of institutional clients that have layers of bureaucracy where we're dealing with people. Usually our clients are very passionate about the project that they're tackling. Sometimes it's the only project they've ever done or ever will do. And we like that. I mean, those are the people, they're very invested in the project versus someone that's doing it as a facility manager who may be more spreadsheet driven.
Gotcha.
So
yeah, and operations and maintenance type driven, but those issues are important.
Yeah, motivations are different because a lot of these people it's their business, or it's a redevelopment that they are investing a lot of their own capital and cash into. So they're very heavily engaged and invested in the whole process, which is good and bad. So
yeah. And is there a process of education, similar to what Amber talked about green building, or are they coming to you usually with that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, they come to us as the experts to help guide them through that process. And we, in certain areas, we're architects, so we're generalists by practice. And so we tend to bring in experts. We bring in engineers or different folks that maybe have specialized knowledge, especially on things like solar systems, like a solar energy system. I know the basics, but we're going to bring somebody in that has a great knowledge about where the proper siting is for the solar collectors. And then we integrate that into the design.
Yeah, that's a good example of the experts that get involved with architects on these different types of buildings. So Monica, maybe if you could talk about the clients that you work with and what the green process or what the process might be, whether or not it's a green building or not, and share with us how that works with you and your clients.
Sure. So at Kaler Slater, we're able to work on wide array of sizes of projects and clients. So if we're working with an institutional client like a university or a hospital, usually they already have a sustainability program or certification requirements like LEED. They usually are already committed in some way to a sustainability program. So that makes the conversation very easy. But we also work with private clients like developers, and then it depends on the type of developer they are. Usually a developer will only own a building for a short while and then sell it. So it's harder to convince them of long-term savings. when talking about design, usually they need some kind of financial reward if it's not required by a municipality to do something. They're usually more likely to design to a code minimum. But as architects, we do have design approaches that we can integrate regardless by considering sun orientation and fenestration to buildings for shading. It's once you get to higher performance wall sections with layers that are beyond code, that cost increases, that we would then have to have more specific conversations with the client on what goals would they have for the performance of their building. But if they're a smaller developer or smaller client, like the ones that Joe was referencing, where they stay with their buildings, it's much easier to talk about, that return on investment that they're going to see long term by spending that money upfront on better design and better performing buildings.
Makes sense. Yes. So yeah, the bigger clients, it might be harder to do that. Well, I guess if they're the building owner, maybe not. Let's delve into that a little bit more on, what technologies and what things have you seen in the green building industry that have changed in the last 10 years? And what do you see changing, being different 10 years from now? Who would like to take the first?
I'll take it. I was recently came across a survey that said that millennials and Gen Xers are a lot more interested, I should say Gen Zers are more interested in green building. And this is very encouraging to me because most of my clients are the baby boomers. They're the ones that have the money to invest in either a new home or a major remodel addition, such that they're looking for my services. But I'm encouraged to read that the younger generation, at least on paper, say that they are interested in green building. And the number one criteria that they have is indoor air quality, which is really interesting coming out of COVID. So they might be more interested in the non-toxic materials and products that I've been using in my homes. They're also interested in resiliency in the face of climate change. And that's not a conversation that I've had with my clients in the past. And then they're also interested in net zero. So the thing that I find is that compared to 10 years ago, clients are much more educated, obviously with the internet and with YouTube and being able to Google anything and take various seminars like we're having today. Homeowners are much more informed, and I found that they often are more informed than my builders about new products, about new processes, about the interesting, flashy new projects that you can see on the internet through Dwell magazine or other publications. So it has come as a shock to some of my clients that when they have a conversation with the builder's never heard of various products that they just have stumbled on the internet.
You had talked about, Amber, a way of helping to get the contractors that do know how to install these systems by working through the vendor or the supplier of the material. Speak a little bit more about that. Yeah.
Right. So if there is a particular product, let's say one of my clients wanted to use rock wool insulation, which has a lower carbon footprint than styrofoam. It's a good replacement for like a styrofoam type product in certain conditions. And so he was coming across that the builders had never used this product before. It's a special order through their usual vendors, certainly not necessarily on stock in the big box stores. But to find qualified installers and to find technical information, going directly to the manufacturer's website or their sales reps is the way that I've been relying on more lately than I used to. I think that's been common in commercial work, but in residential work, most manufacturers haven't made their information at the level where the average homeowner, the average builder can access it and implement their technical details. So I'm finding that more companies do have user-friendly material on their websites.
Excellent. Monica or Joe, how about you guys? What changes have you seen in the past 10 years, and what do you see changing and being different 10 years from now with regards to green building design and construction?
I'll go first, so we don't talk over each other. I will say consumer awareness, like how Amber was touching on, has become more prevalent, and it's really prevalent across building types. So programs like LEED, I think, did a good job of introducing sustainable design to the general public. And now there are even more certification programs, especially for larger buildings. You've got WELL, you've got Living Building Challenge, you've got programs that really push sustainability even further. Net zero are all possibilities now for buildings, and especially for larger clients. And then also with the material certification programs, it's a lot easier to make selections for healthy and less environmentally impactful materials. So that is just part of the cycle of consumers being aware of what's available to them, and then us as designers pushing even further with what can be possible and affordable for green architecture.
Excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought about this question a lot since we had a pre-meeting, and I was kind of having a hard time coming up with an answer, but there's one that actually really stuck out to me, and that's I think a change in how we think about the supply chain. And that's something that's really become an issue that we've all seen in construction, or if you've gone to buy an appliance in the last year, or a car. But I think that really has a strong relationship to building materials and the green and sustainable nature of building materials, because things that are made and processed overseas and have to be shipped, I mean, there's a lot of carbon involved in that entire process versus materials that are local. And for me, it may be a cost neutral type of situation, because sometimes reclaimed materials, or let's say commonly available materials, might take more labor. I feel like it's maybe a shift of where those dollars are spent. Is it spent more? Are you spending more on labor, or are you spending more on that certain material? And I think there's a lot of added benefits to sourcing local material, sourcing reused and reclaimed material, because again, that takes those dollars and puts them into the pockets of people locally, because the person that is going to have to reshape or rehone this material is likely local, is someone that's a craftsperson that is involved locally. So I think that has a lot of benefits just in terms of job creation, skills. These are win-wins for communities when we do preserve buildings and reuse and adapt them. So I think that's where I hope I hope we kind of return more to local, where, when you travel around different areas, there were all these local materials, that local stone that showed up in buildings, and then it became much more homogenized. And I hope we can return more to developing that local, material sourcing.
I like that a lot, because I feel like that's a great example of how green building projects can be not more expensive, and also address the supply chain issue of getting materials from sources where we normally get them that are far away from the site that it's being built on.
Steve, I'd like to add something about supply chain as well.
Sure.
This goes back, 10, 20, 30 years ago. In the home building world, if you wanted to purchase a toilet, you went through your plumber. The plumber supplied the materials, and that would be true for all the trades. Nowadays, if you went to your local plumber and said, I want a dual flush, low flush toilet, gallons per minute, because you've done your research, you know that they're out there. The plumber, your local plumber, might not know about that. They might not be able to get that through their usual supply chains. They might not think that's a good idea, but now you can go on any number of building supply websites, order it as a consumer, no shipping charge, and it gets to you within a couple days. So to me, it's very antiquated to go through your local supplier, your local subcontractor, even your local lumber yard to order something when the consumer can go directly to a product vendor and get it within a couple days. So then the onus is on the client to do the research about low VOC finishes, formaldehyde-free particle or board or plywood. All of that information is available. But if you went through the usual way that my clients had to go, which is through a lumber yard, through their supplier, back to the manufacturer, you would not have this information and you wouldn't be able to order it in a timely way and have control over that.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. That's good to hear. And I feel like that's only going to get better as
Yes, yeah.
more things become available to order online. So this is a question that so many at 350 Wisconsin want to ask. How can we, as you know, an educated general public on issues with climate change and reducing carbon in our buildings, how can we have an impact to further green building construction, both in the residential and commercial building markets? What are suggestions that you guys as architects would make to the public, people attending this session today? Do you have a thought on that, Monica?
Amber's been really preaching the importance of an educated consumer, right? So I think people need to be aware of it and ask for it of their designers, or of those that are providing the buildings to them. And they should work with professionals that are interested in and are capable of doing it. Not every architect's the same, just like not every hairstylist is the same. So you should really shop around and make sure that your values align with the professionals that you work with. And then lastly, from a larger perspective, I would recommend lobbying for requirements on a municipal level that, you know, if a building's over a certain size, it needs to meet X, Y, and Z. I think having those conversations with local municipalities on what is possible to require that isn't a hindrance, but is actually going to help create a healthy community is a worthwhile conversation to have.
Excellent. Other thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think lighting is a good example of, I remember 15 years ago, LED lighting was, well, the quality was pretty terrible, but the cost was really high. And it was just, that was a tough thing to get LED lighting specified into a project. And now it's absolutely the standard and the norm. And part of that is changes in the code. It was the number of watts per square foot that was allowed for these projects, and you simply you can't even meet code if you want to do incandescent lighting. It just won't happen. And sometimes I have clients that want to go back, oh, we like the character and the feel of the incandescent lights, and they're like, well, it doesn't meet code anymore. You can't just, it simply consumes way too much power. But we can tune the lighting to get the right color temperature with that lighting. So there are these, you know, when changes are made to the building code, it will impact the industry, because that will because the manufacturers have to comply if they want to sell product. And so that is that is a really good way to get things moving that way. I think paints too, you know, I think the change in low VOC paints has come a long way. That's not such a specialty item. I think a lot of paints are kind of have gone that direction. So.
Yeah, I would echo that. What Joe said about the code is that I have had clients be shocked to be told by me, I guess, that the code is the bare minimum that you can build. I think the average homeowner assumes that the code or the regulations that are out there reflect good building science or, you know, the latest recommendations. So the first conversation I need to have is, we need to work on a building that's way above code. And then as far as how other people can help, like the people on this forum who are listening, frankly, I think it's social pressure. If you have a friend or acquaintance or a family member who's thinking about an addition, a remodel, a new home, just ask them in a friendly way. Oh, are you considering solar panels? Are you looking at maybe extra insulation? I mean, just drop these ideas out to them and see where it goes.
I'd like to also point out regarding code, I don't know if the general public's aware that in Wisconsin, the residential code is still from 2009 and our commercial code is from 2015. So I think our state adopting codes at a more regular basis on a more regular cycle would also help keep suppliers, keep builders up to date on products, have it be less of a challenge when there is a code update to meet that new minimum. And then maybe that would also spur a desire to stay up on those technologies.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. What are some ways that the general public can influence government to upgrade the codes or update the codes, like you said, Monica?
I think Lisa could actually speak to that a little
I was
bit.
Yeah,
gonna
you're
say,
right.
yeah,
Sure, Lisa, thank
I
you.
could answer that one.
There's a lot going on right now in the state.
That's right.
Yes, there is. And I also want to point out that Wisconsin is not the worst in that regard. There are states that only update their codes like every 10 years or more. So it is a legislative action. And so the onus is really on the profession and the public to demand that from our legislators. So it really becomes, unfortunately, a political exercise. But it really is it is a lobbying effort to get those changes made.
Yeah. This gets to the question of, does green building need to be a more expensive option for a client? Or are we at a point, or getting close to a point in this where it's just the way that a lot of clients should do their work, so that it's a cost neutral decision of doing green building versus not? Or maybe there's a different approach than looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's in some ways it does cost more because it is higher quality. So sometimes, that argument of, green building costs more. Well, it's a higher quality building, a higher quality product. So I don't think there should be an expectation that it shouldn't cost more, because especially let's say insulation, there's just simply more of it. So it's going to cost more than less of it that meets a baseline minimum. I think as architects, we have the power to influence our clients to site our buildings in such a way that make more sense, like actually use an overhang to shelter from the sun. There are things that we can do that are, I would say, zero cost type items that I think with the right design team, you can be led to a more green solution that doesn't add any costs to the project. But in certain things with systems, they are a higher, I would say, a higher end result quality. But how do we value those things then? Maybe from real estate appraisals, maybe there needs to be something about energy usage on homes that would be transparent with listings, or this home consumes X amount. It's like miles per gallon with cars. Maybe we have a standard out there for homes that are part of real estate listings that start to then put pressure on residential. So I don't know, maybe Amber has some cool thoughts about that.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, Joe, that a green home is a higher quality home. It's built more carefully with more durable materials. And a lot of my clients come to me either for a new home or remodeling, and they've had frustrating experiences with their past homes. I mean, most people have had problems with mold or mildew, ice dams, rodents or insects. bats, leaky basements, water intrusion, uneven temperatures, drafts. I mean, these are all frustrations that the average homeowner has with their homes, and they can be solved with quality construction. And then the green construction, just as Joe said, is more insulation. So for instance, on the home that I built as a demonstration home, what I explained to people, I mean, it's very, very simple. I showed them that I have a 12-inch thick wall. Okay, code minimum would be a 6-inch thick wall. So I've doubled my code values under the slab, in the wall, and at the ceiling level. That means that I can half the amount of mechanical equipment that I need. And my numbers prove that. I spent twice as much on insulation, but I spent half as much on my mechanical system. And then of course, my monthly costs are a fraction, or technically, in broad strokes, half of that amount. So where I did spend more on my new house is I made larger cavities for that insulation. And I don't have hard numbers for that, but roughly, I think that the payback on that is about 10 years. So that conversation of what the payback is, it varies from project to project, but I think most people going into a major expense, either a new home or a major remodel, are willing to think about a 10-year payback. And so energy modeling, which is often provided by an architect, can help prove the point before all the design decisions are made. I've done some energy modeling, but it's not something that my clients ask about or are even willing to pay extra for. That's actually a hard sell as well. Right. But I do think it's important to do some rudimentary energy modeling to make that case for green building.
I think it's also important to understand that the term green and the term sustainable has a wide range of meanings, and that can lead to a wide range of goals. So it's possible to have aspects of a building or a project be sustainable, but not necessarily do everything. And there's a lot of frameworks for green design out there that folks can educate themselves on. Maybe your goal is energy use, maybe your goal is water use, maybe you're thinking about well-being holistically. There's different aspects of the built environment that can be designed to be green or sustainable, which can also impact the cost.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's interesting. And Monica, speak more about, for the buildings you do, the commercial buildings in the private sector, the multi-use buildings, high density residential, where they are designed as energy efficient, which also means they're comfortable buildings. Their environment, the indoor environment, it's comfortable both in the winter and the summer versus outside temperatures. And it's also that added value that maybe doesn't amount to dollars, but does amount to a value for the building owner and how it's operated, as well as how comfortable the people are that use the building. Are you seeing
right
that?
And it just depends on the use of that building, of whether that's an argument that a building owner or developer is going to listen to. But that's just one aspect, right? That's the energy use aspect of a building, but we're able to calculate the impact of the exterior of the building on energy use, which can then also inform the sizing and different types of mechanical systems, which is part of the process of deciding, what's appropriate. Is geothermal appropriate? Is gas or electric appropriate? And there's pros and cons to everything. It really depends also on the scale of a building and the use of a building. So those are all conversations that become a bit more complex the bigger the building is.
I'm sure.
you know, things like stormwater management. If you're talking about a larger building that's on a city block, are you collecting any of that? Are you utilizing a green roof that'll slow down the flow of water drainage? So there's a whole slew of aspects of a building. The bigger the building it gets, that we can talk about with the client, that we can design to.
Sure. Yeah, and it gets complicated, and it goes back to what the client's goals are. Joe, I
Right.
wanted you to have just a minute to speak about something we talked about at the prior meeting on reusing an existing building as an option, and or working with your client on the size of the building, because we all know that the bigger the building gets, the more impact it's had, more energy it takes to heat and cool a building. What have you found in that?
Yeah, the size of the buildings on commercial projects, I don't find that to be too hard of an argument, but I find it to be a big point on residential projects. You know, if a client is serious about being sustainable and green, usually limiting that footprint, you know, a 2,000 square foot house is going to be much more efficient than a 6,000 square foot house that's sprawling and so getting people to have that discipline to be okay with a little smaller space, because I think that is all part of the if you do an 8,000 square foot home that has solar panels on it, I'm not sure that that's more green than a 2,000 square foot home that doesn't that just is much more, that doesn't consume the energy in the first place.
Exactly.
So getting people into that mindset, I think, as that then relates to reusing buildings versus building new, I don't know, I just, there's so much intangible value in reuse of buildings that goes beyond the sustainable. I think it has cultural value. You know, it's a connection to a place in history, and oftentimes, you know, much of the built environment is there already. Much of our cities are already there. So how can we go in, and instead of demolishing and building new, something that is, you know, usually pales in comparison in terms of quality of materials, you know, I always encourage people to, you know, yeah, you need the vision. The architect kind of has to go in and have that vision of what this could be, because oftentimes, you know, we walk into these buildings and it's the roof has collapsed. It's a mess, and you need to be able to sell that vision of, okay, this is going to be an amazing place when we're done with it.
Yeah.
And so
That can be hard sometimes, but
yeah,
it's worth it, I think. And
Steve, we have a couple of questions in the chat box. Would you like to go to those?
absolutely, yeah. Why don't you get us started, Lisa?
Yeah, we've got one. Kathy said, we've all seen projects that start out with green goals, but then hit barriers, cost, supply, etc. How do you support your clients through from design to completion so that the green vision is realized? Great question.
Yeah. I don't have a ready answer for that. It's tough. So I would say that the best way is to have as many decisions made upfront and products selected and really solid plans and details before you start the bidding process, and certainly before you start the construction process. So having as many decisions made ahead of time, and then the commitment by all parties to stick with those decisions and not renegotiate them as time goes on.
That's part of that green building approach, regardless of the size of a client. If those are determined to be goals of a project early on, it's easier to stick with them. But as design professionals, we are used to working with our clients and constantly adapting the design, and up until just about it's built, or even during construction, we still have to be creative. So it's just a matter of you know, being aware of what's going on and providing them the information they need to make the decisions, because at the end of the day, it's all the clients are the ones making the final decisions, and we're there to be trusted advisors and provide them with the information that they need. So
Yeah, I think the key word in that is support the clients, because
Mhm.
ultimately they're the ones with the checkbook that have to either fund the project or get it through to completion. So do that best on advising of what the consequence of maybe not following through on an early goal might be in the long term. So sometimes they just have to be reminded of the impact or how that will affect long-term operational costs, because saving a couple $100,000 up front could cost a lot more in the whole the long run of that building, because
But there
these
might
buildings
also
are.
be alternate choices
Mhm.
that it's not all or nothing. There might be something in the gray zone, right? So that's where our knowledge is helpful to the client and to the
Yeah.
project.
Mhm.
In your experience working with clients, you understand what you can sell and what you can't, how far you can take something. So I think that's important. They work with architects. So Amber, Kathy had another question, Kathy Coons from Dane County, about the role of consumers and how you were saying they're playing a bigger role in getting a green home. But she mentions people are busy and we need these solutions at scale. So how can we influence the industry in general to make these choices easier for consumers? All three of you, if you have any thoughts.
I think it's
Well,
already happening.
yeah.
Yeah. How do you see it happening already? The industry being influenced to move towards this type of work.
Just with the product availability out there, it's like Amber's electric vehicle example. As consumers are more aware, this information is now provided upfront to them. So I do think that's already happening. And then if you don't have the time to do your own research, you could at least research the people that you work with, like your architect or your builder, so that they can make those decisions or inform those decisions with you. But I'll pass it on to Joe or Amber to elaborate.
Thanks.
I think it's the comparison. I mean, it's like, what are you sometimes if people are trying to compare green and sustainable buildings to ordinary buildings, it's like comparing the electric car to the other cars. Sometimes it can be a hard comparison to make, and then just creating some metrics and value system around it. What are the consequences of not doing it? Carbon tax, things of that nature could help with when as new buildings are coming online. If you're not doing it a certain way, there could be these sticks instead of carrots that people react to both. But
Mhm. I think for the busy client, it is daunting unless you can find a builder and an architect who have a track record of designing and building homes like this. But most are custom one-off designs and builds, unless you go with one of the subdivision builders who are maybe building Energy Star homes. That's a possibility. So, and that brings up another point, is the average consumer, they could try to find a builder who builds to a certain standard, whether it's Energy Star, LEED, Passive House, one of these programs, knowing that builder is pre-qualified to build a home to a certain standard. But there is a shortage of builders and workers who know how to do these high performance details. The other thing that make people aware of is that there are many products that are marketed as green, but kind of like what Joe said, the everyday off-the-shelf products can be used and get the same results, but they're not heavily advertised. It's the assembly of these common materials that make them more affordable, more green, and more local.
That's interesting.
Mhm.
Looks like we had a question from Marianne. Do you want to take that, Lisa?
Sure. Marianne says, to make changes in local building codes, isn't it essential to lobby at the state level instead of the city level? My understanding is that a city like Baraboo can't have a more restrictive building code than what the state requires. Is that correct? If so, what groups, organizations are doing this statewide lobbying right now?
Go ahead, Lisa.
I
So you're-
answered the last part of it. Yeah, I was just going to give a little background on building codes. Most states adopt now a model code, which is a code that is created by a national organization. It used to be that lots of states had their own building codes, but now usually the state adopts a model code like the International Building Code, which is what Wisconsin's building code is modeled on. And then they make amendments to that. And they can be more restrictive. It kind of depends on the situation, but I'll answer the last part of the question. I'll let the panelists answer the rest of the middle of it. Groups like ours do lobby the state on issues like this. There are engineering professional associations, there are general contractor professional associations, and we all have a lobbyist or are registered as lobbyists to affect that. But what the public can do is educate their elected officials. Politicians don't know much about the building industry across the board, and I'm reminded of that every time I go to speak to a group. So the best thing that you can do at your level, at your local level, is to make sure that your elected officials understand what's important in the building code and what you believe that you would like to see in the building code. So it kind of starts from the grassroots level and goes up.
Interesting.
I've worked across the country, and every state's a little different with how they implement building codes and requirements. Sometimes it's more at a local level where municipalities have a little bit more influence on what the requirements are to build there. So there's a lot of examples across the country that lobbying groups could at least get information about how they're working in other locations. But I'm not a government official here in Wisconsin, so I'm not as familiar with the nuances of what it would take for a city to have a higher requirement, whether there's a way to do it at a zoning level or another level as part of the permitting process.
Yeah, I know, Mary Ann, with regards to like plumbing codes and stormwater management requirements, the federal government, the EPA, has a requirement at one level. The state of Wisconsin has to do at least that with their requirements in general for the state, and then it just goes down. Dane County has to do at least that. They can do more when it comes to requirements for stormwater management and the stuff that I deal with for site design, and same thing with the city of Madison. They have to be at least as stringent as the Dane County, but they can request more. Do you find, Monica and Amber and Joe, that that's the case like for municipalities and versus the county versus the state when it comes to building codes, or is it different?
Building codes are pretty uniformly enforced by the different cities. Where I do find a big variance is in fire codes and sprinklers, where the fire departments can actually impose more stringent sprinklering requirements. Let's say, I know there's certain municipalities where the adopted state building code would say, nope, you don't need a sprinkler, but there's a municipal ordinance that layers on top of that then requires a sprinkler of any building over 5,000 square feet. So I don't see why there couldn't be some mechanisms to be able to take things like that on. I know City of Madison is trying to do a bird glazing. And then there was some conflict, some groups battling back saying, well, this is not required in the building code, or you can't mess with the building code.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I could see insulation or building efficiency systems, if certain cities, I feel like they're there is a route. I don't know all the technicalities of it, but I always see it with local fire departments and even municipalities relating to life safety and fire sprinkler coverage. That
Sure.
can vary greatly.
One thing I've seen or heard about a lot is this idea of all electric buildings, which if you have a power, a grid system where the electricity is being generated more and more by renewable energy sources versus gas or coal, it makes sense as a way to reduce the impact of buildings on, their carbon footprint and the climate impact. Are you guys seeing more and more all electric buildings where we don't have the need for gas as a power source?
Well, my home is all electric and my monthly average uses comes to $6.50. That's how much electricity I use at 12 cents a kilowatt hour.
Wow.
So it's possible. And that's what I really try to, that's why I have my house open to the public by appointment to see my house. And I think that it's the most powerful way to convince people is when they see an actual example in person.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I have a client that's doing a custom house it's going to be all electric. So, and they're going to do radiant heating in the slab, and it's going to be an electric boiler. So, and they have
Mhm.
land where they're going to do a solar array. They also have goats to be able to take care of the
That's great.
the maintenance around the panels. So
Wonderful.
Right.
I will say even in apartment buildings, that all electric is becoming more and more common.
You are seeing that. That's cool.
Yep.
Cool to hear. Well, thank you, all three of you, for your time today. It is 1 o'clock, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Joe, for being here with us today.
you.
And thank you all for joining us for this discussion. Look for, if you put your email in there, look for follow-up information. And if there's nothing else anybody else had to contribute, well, we'll call it a day, and you all have a good rest of the day, and do what you can to make our state greener and more respectful of the environment wherever you can. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks, Steve.